headed out to this series of offshore pinnacles in the middle of the English Channel, and the numbers of bass were absolutely unreal. There were thousands of them, like clouds and swarms of bass just everywhere.
There were so many bass, just twisting and turning in a very slight current over this pinnacle. And the most interesting thing was watching how the bass signal to each other with their fins. As soon as one bass moves, the others all pick up on its fin movement and they all move as one. It's so cool just watching these shoals drifting down slowly and hoping to find a standout fish to have a shot at. I wasn't in a massive rush to take a fish. On this dive, I headed straight for the bottom, hoping that the bass would just settle all around me. I could easily pick off a good fish. I'm in about 12.5 to 13 metres of water here, and you see the bass just soon come back in. And I pick out what looks like a standout fish. It's a very nice fish here, about 7 or 8 pounds. Take the shot, and my reel just somehow just sprawls upon the line. The bass takes about 10 metres of line. I've got to try and haul it back in. I almost get up to the surface, and it must have been quite a bad shot. Yeah, possibly with just one 14mm rubber, the spear hadn't gone all the way through, and I lose the fish. It looks like it swam off pretty unharmed. So I dropped down again, and this time I decided that rather than going to the bottom, I was just going to drift down at neutral buoyancy and just allow the fish to settle. Now most of the big fish had spooked by this point, so I was left with the remaining fish in the shoal. And I picked one here, not a massive fish, but a decent fish there, about 5.5 pounds. Not a bad fish. Would have been nice to get a big one, but this is all that was left after a number of divers had been in the water through the shoal. Bobby dived down. This is actually just before I got in, and you can see him heading down here, and the numbers of bass look even more impressive when seen behind another diver in the water. What's really interesting here is the slightest movement of the spear and all the bass scatter. It's really interesting actually watching this footage. Bit of head movement, they're all gone. Bit of spear movement, they're all gone. If you stay still, they'd almost swim onto the spear tip. As I'd already taken a bass, I decided to drift on straight through the bass shoal and see what was underneath them. So I nip down here, all the bass scatter, I hit negative buoyancy and just slowly drift down through, wondering if there's going to be potentially a big pollock sat underneath that school. And shortly after I settle on the bottom, a big coalfish comes into view, and I make no mistake and stone it.
After shooting a bass each, and one of the other divers had a 12-pounder. It was so big it looked like a carp in the water. We headed to some other pinnacles to look for black bream and some slightly deeper areas to hopefully get a big pollock.
We dropped down looking for some bream. We'd heard there can be bream on this pinnacle, but all we really saw was small pollock. And couple of coalfish in amongst this, and in the next clip you'll see the distinctive differences between a pollock and a coalfish. See the coalfish there with the thin white line and slightly different fins, very different tail. Coalfish have more of a V-notch in their tail. And there were a number of bass at depth. They were all small and I didn't want to take another one. On the next drop I went straight into about 18 metres of water, spooking quite a nice pollock as I hit the bottom. That was definitely shootable. Hit the bottom, I'd grunt a couple of times, and soon enough a good pollock comes in. It wasn't a massive fish, but I got 2 big fillets off it and it tasted very, very nice. Now, one of the things I've been working on quite a lot is getting into better cover, and this is an example of that. I see myself sandwiched between 2 large bits of kelp, tucked away, so that the fish can almost come around that and come straight onto me. Now in this clip, I'm going to take you through an entire dive. So this is a dive to about 17.5 metres. So here it takes 20 seconds to hit the bottom, and what I'm doing here is just drifting down to reach neutral buoyancy, and then after that I pretty much stop finning. Just before I get down to the kelp, I try and level out a bit so I don't land too hard. I'm trying to land really slowly. Then I get on the bottom and I just very gradually move forwards into good cover here. You can see I'm pretty much hidden, apart from the front kind of 20 centimetres of my gun to any fish approaching. Now at this depth you can definitely feel the pressure on your chest, and what I've been trying to really work on this season is relaxing quite hard at this depth. So I imagine almost like a wave of relaxation going through each limb, starting with my left arm, then my right arm, then each leg. And I try and really, really relax my legs. I've certainly found that the moment you knock your fins together, all the fish spook. A couple of grunts, and I'm just trying to stay as still as possible. It's tempting to just look round really vigorously, but it always seems to put the fish off. And after just under a minute on the bottom, a pollock appears and I stone it. And then from that point, it's 15 seconds to reach the surface. The total dive time is 1 minute 35. And I was quite happy with that. I needed to really, really relax to do it.
The final dive of the day, we hit a shipwreck. A merchant ship sunk by a German U-boat in 1945. This was another amazing dive.
The wreck was pretty amazing. It was quite cool actually, just sitting on top of these metal kind of girders and looking down for fish. Next time I go, I'm going to drop right to the bottom, which is about 25 metres, but I wasn't quite feeling up to it today. You can see here some reasonable sized pollock through there. I line up on one, have a shot, but the spear just doesn't penetrate. I was underpowered. Next drop, hit the wreck again. Have a little look through, hoping for a big bass. But again, there's just a few decent pollock here. Unfortunately, I think the scuba divers going through this wreck earlier in the day probably spooked all the fish off, so we headed to a shallow mark to search for brown crab, lobster and triggerfish. We tried a few aspeto dives, hoping for a shoulder bass to come through. Me and Bobby had only shot one each, so we still had one left in our bag limit. Scared Bobby a little bit here, that was quite fun. But there were no bass about, so quickly we started to look for crustaceans. I found this big brown crab in a hole, and without anything to hook it out with, I'd left my spear gun somewhere else. I had to just go for it and grab it. These crabs are unbelievably strong, and you really do not want to get pinched by one, but I decided to go for it. It's a really nice way to end the dive. I do love eating crab, and I don't catch many in North Wales. They're fantastic. I hope you enjoyed that video. To see more like this, do subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out and helps the channel grow. The next video is like this. This is the Isle of Skye. I had some absolutely stunning diving in crystal clear water for pollock and coalfish. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out.